What's up, San Diego? You guys are incredible. It's awesome to see such a cool room full of faces that I have not yet been able to meet. I'm up in Los Angeles, and we have a really amazing, vibrant community up there. And down here in San Diego, we have a lot of amazing people, and it's awesome to dive deeper into it. My name is Malia Probst. I'm going to be just gabbing up here all night and talking to these amazing people. I'm Director of Brand Development at VR Scout. I have a couple of podcasts as well. One is called The Real Virtual Show, where I get to interview amazing people like these people who are leaders and revolutionaries in the VR AR field. I get to talk to pioneers. I get to learn so much from them. And then I also do the VR Scout podcast. It's a weekly news wrap up of all things VR AR. And so it's a great way to be able to keep in the loop of everything going on, because I know you guys know it's very difficult. There's so much news that comes out, it seems like every single week. It's a nice way to kind of stay in touch and keep on top of things. I also co-founded a company called Reality Inspired. My business partner, where is she? There she is, Crystal, there she is right there, that gorgeous thing. Reality Inspired, we do virtual reality as marketing and sales tools for luxury brands. So we are going to talk to these three lovely people right now. Casey and I met earlier today, and so I didn't tell him, but it's just going to be a roast of Casey. No? All right.
Yeah, that's all right.
All right, that's fair.
She's going to ask me all the hard questions.
All the hard questions, just for you. Yeah. Would you, first of all, we're going to go down the line and introduce yourselves, and I guess I'll share the mic with you first, Casey.
So my name's Casey. I've been running a commercial production company for just immersive video. Of the many different definitions of VR, we just do 360 video, and we try to do that to the best that the technology can produce. And so we've got a lot of guys in visual effects who've been working in Nuke and Maya, and if you guys are familiar with that. And it's a very different type of VR than, for example, what Eric's going to be doing and talking about. So with that, there's many of you guys. How many people have produced a 360 video in this room with a camera? So quite a few people using different types of cameras. So, we're just one of those guys and just trying to do it full time.
I'm Sandra, and curiously, I came to VR through one of my first careers in Alaska with an Eskimo curriculum project, and I became convinced there were alternate views of reality. I went to graduate school and I saw Jaron Lanier and some of the early VR equipment, and I thought, this will do it. This will create realities I can design, but that was very early. So I did my doctoral research, even though the professor said it's professional suicide. And nobody was hiring designers, so I designed conference programs in the 90s. And I just showed this to Eric, my war stories. I said, 1993, the virtual reality marketplace directory, at that time we estimated $10 million comprised the entire VR marketplace. Today, it's in the billions. The technology has matured. I am extremely pleased to be back working in the field. I own a strategic communications company, and I communicate at the frontiers, much like the Alaska frontier, the frontiers of communication and technology. I have clients who need business advice, who need media advice, and my publisher, who started in the VR field in the 90s, came back to me a couple of years ago and said, would you organize VR conferences once again? And I have never been happier, because at last, the technology, the dream, the people, and I didn't realize until I started this, with all the long distance work that I do, that there is such a rich community of developers here in Southern California, and I'll talk more about that later. But I think that the cluster, if you call it that, that's formed here is going to be very important. Yes, we have the hardware now, but we also need the content creators. And there's incredible creators here. So with that, I'll turn it.
By the way, this book is really neat. If you get a chance, you should take a peek at it. if you think about everything that had to go into compiling it, not just in 1993, but just the idea that the second pass now for virtual reality has so much more excitement around it. So, my name is Schleicher. I'm a principal in a company called Obrary. We are kind of under the covers. We're a manufacturing automation company. We started our business under this premise that in the future, with big improvements in digital manufacturing, that we would be able to have more products that we use made closer to us than further away. And so we became very enamored with this idea of the flexible product and this idea that digital fabrication could let us have products that were more meaningfully customized. What that meant for us as an entrepreneurial startup was that we needed to find a way to go make money doing personalized products today. And so our company today has what we would call a shopping SDK that we implement in our customers' websites that typically right now are gift personalizers. And so we have software that kind of drops into their site and it drives a real-time visualization experience for somebody getting a personalized gift. And so we've been making big investments in and around virtual reality, waiting for kind of the moment where more companies really start to get serious about how people are going to shop as virtual reality becomes more kind of omnipresent and ubiquitous experience. So that's about as short as I can make it.
Yeah. So I want to go down the panel here and kind of ask you guys what is one thing that you're working on, what's a specific thing that's challenging? What's a specific thing that's going really, really well? And Casey, you've produced some really, really gorgeous 360 videos, and I know that the underwater camera that Casey came up with, it was the world's first 360 underwater camera, right? World's first.
I don't know.
Yeah,
Maybe.
yeah, I think it was. Maybe that was a big challenge. I thought that was really interesting. And a lot of his videos have also featured animals, and so maybe that was a particular challenge, working with that kind of unpredictability. But I'd love to hear something that has been working really well, and maybe something that's a challenge for you kind of moving forward.
So, I'll talk about immersive video for 30 seconds. As a startup, you make a lot of promises that you aren't really sure how you're going to fulfill in order to make money and to get the client on board. And we promised to SeaWorld that we could do an underwater 360 stereo camera. We knew hypothetically that it could work, but we had never done it. And they came back to us and said, yeah, we looked at everybody and we like that idea, so go with it. And so they didn't know that we hadn't built it, so we went and did a bunch of tests, and then we produced footage, and it came out very well. 8 to 10K, 60 to 120 frames a second, and now we're building a theme park attraction that's going to release in April at SeaWorld San Diego, and then open at San Antonio and Orlando after that. So I'm really excited about that. I wish I was able to share more and talk about it more, because I'm spending all my time on it, and no one knows, what I'm doing. So, but it's been really fun. And on the immersive video side, there's so many problems to get solved, and there's so many places you can't put a camera because it'll get broken, it'll get wet, it's too dark, it's this, it's that, and so anyone who's actually tried to produce a quality commercial film, ends up trying to use 6 to 7 cameras sometimes, pulling them out like golf clubs, as the scene calls for. So that's been, our side, and that's what I've seen. Yeah, that's it.
Cool. Yeah, Sandra?
The Virtual Reality Summit is part of a series we started this particular group, 20 years after the first one, in Santa Clara, then in New York in April, and this is the first one in San Diego. And again, it's given me an opportunity to get to know the local developers. We also have world-class speakers who will be coming in. As Casey said, we have the VR/AR director of Samsung. He had a conference call with us the other day, and some of the things that he talked about I felt like I was taking a submarine ride into the future or something, and some of the things, I don't know that we are supposed to repeat those. At one point he said, well, I've said more than I thought I would, but we're going to have him here as the keynote. Again, Groove Jones. Alluding to you in luxury fashion, we should talk because the publisher said we can't bite off all the markets. It's a 2-day conference, only one track. I have 150 to 170 people now on a waiting list who want to speak, but it's for branded experiences. In other words, marketing, the SeaWorld orientation where you're producing something with a brand behind it, the monetization of that. So it's been different. My former conferences, and I organized Virtual Humans in LA, also got into nanotech investment forums, biotech partnering over the years. It's like you have to pivot when the economy changes. But this has been one of the most, I think, rewarding ones. So we're working very closely with the VR, the Meetup groups. Brian's been particularly helpful. Actually, the fellow who coded the 1990s VR market directory is now co-founder of the Boston Meetup VR. So one of the important things about conferences is it forms communities. And I think when they put the ecosystem charts together, I see Tipitat and the ecosystem charts, they have all the hardware and the businesses, but we need the social side too, the meetups, the conferences. Where is it important that you be for your career and to grow your business? And that's kind of what I'm about, is growing the business for everybody here. Okay.
So the question is unique challenges, is that?
Yeah. What's kind of working well for you, and then maybe what's a challenge?
Yeah. So having tried to do, I guess what I would look at as forward engineering more than once in my career, I think one of the things that's going very, very well is just the general pace or tempo of improvement and advancement in and around VR. So, as a company that is looking to provide services to people who have e-commerce solutions, there's this minimum experience that we have to kind of deal with and work around. And while VR, all the kind of the experiences that we look at right now with the Vive and kind of the Cadillac experience, Web VR is has its own track that I think part of what's working really well is that it's evolving at an incredibly fast rate, even compared to the desktop experiences. So, other things, looking at how, even how the rate at which, Angular and other web development frameworks kind of evolved and came to be, WebVR seems to be evolving much faster. And
I know that you're a really big believer in WebVR, and are you building most of your experiences within the WebVR framework and web-based VR?
The things that we deliver or will be delivering in our software are really intended to be WebVR experiences. When we talk about that from a shopping perspective, in the future you will find something on a flat web page much like you do today. Maybe there's a 3D view of it, but then there's an immersive experience where you might interact with that product in a more than superficial way, by like a simulation of the actual product rather than just a 3D model of it. So those are the types of functionalities that we're really pursuing. I think if you take WebVR as a kind of a technical concept of a JavaScript API, it's fairly broad. But that's really where we've kind of put our interest, which is we have to provide this very smooth ramp from the shopping experience that people are accustomed to today that will work on all of their hardware, right? So
what do you see? I'm personally really interested in WebVR. Can you kind of unpack that term perhaps for some of the newer people in the room and kind of illustrate exactly what that is, and then why are we not there yet? And what are maybe some of the biggest obstacles for bigger adoption of web-based VR?
So probably one of the biggest challenges for me in that question is keeping the answer really short, right? So to me, there's one very, very significant thing in almost all web development that I think at this point we have to just accept and appreciate, which is JavaScript is the programming language, right? And in the future that will evolve and allow different kind of ways to get code to run in the JavaScript virtual machine in the browser. But kind of the magic thing that's happened on the internet is that, in the 90s or in the 90s and early 2000s, we had this dream that Java was going to be write once, run everywhere, and JavaScript is really the thing that's kind of made good on that promise. And so, WebVR kind of as a kind of related concept to that is really just the way that we expose access to the telemetry and the position of the user inside the browser, right? So it's really at that level really doesn't sound all that complicated. Really, the gap is in what hardware is available that will support WebVR and how much compute power is really available on those. So when we look at what does your virtual reality machine look like in 7 years, prediction, it's a phone or it has a telephone in it, right? And the primary way that you'll consume virtual reality experiences will conceivably be delivered over the standards-based internet rather than with fat client desktop software like what we use on, for games and Unity and everything else. So there's this mashup that's coming, but I think WebVR is really critical in exposing virtual environments and spatial experiences through the browser.
Awesome, thank you. So I want to talk a little bit about sort of what changes we've been seeing happening over the industry, and when we're talking about immersive video with Casey here first, and we're talking about 360 video, you've been doing this for a while and you've seen it evolve, you've seen it happen. How has the space changed? How has it perhaps grown noisier? Like, what are some of the things that you're seeing today that maybe you weren't seeing 6 months ago or you weren't seeing a year ago? How has this kind of evolved for you in terms of 360 video and immersive media?
I think immersive media, there is this space now for professional productions, and we've moved away from Kodaks and GoPros, and we've gotten into these opportunities. Like, there's a company called Pixvana. Samsung's going to release something where you're going to have the opportunity to show something at more than a 10K resolution in the next 12 months. And you're going to be able to present that, right? What kind of cameras do you use if at 10K resolution? And so that really offers the opportunity to charge more, but it's a lot more work and it takes a lot more specialty experience. There's resolution, there's frame rates. Frame rates is a big issue around synchronization. But the future is volumetric capture, and the future is being able to move around, not just up, down, left, right, but actually move through space. And you can already kind of do that if you understand depth mapping and you understand how to match some of the pixels in a video. I don't know if you guys saw one of the releases today of this guy who had 14 RED cameras. The guy who started RED, I think, $1 million worth of cameras, and he created a volumetric demo. It was very impressive. Volumetric capture is something that I would love to defer to Eric because he makes it sound so much smarter.
So, there's a variety of different ways of doing it, but basically the idea that you capture information about the volume or create a mesh of a space that is more than just pixel information about what's captured inside a scene. So there are different approaches to doing this. There are infrared lasers and LiDAR and time of flight and bouncing light off of objects and measuring how much time it takes to come back and forth to kind of create meshes, as well as other approaches like photogrammetry, where you actually take photographs of objects and areas and feed them through these very powerful software algorithms that can reconstruct the 3D meshes. But that's really what gives us the ability to kind of take the real world and bring it into these environments, short of having a digital designer just create it from scratch.
So I want to come back to you, Casey, here for a moment. What have you seen when we're talking about immersive video, we're talking about 360 video? Have you seen, what kind of changes have you seen on the brand side of things? And when companies are coming to you, like, how has perhaps the pitch process changed? Perhaps how have their goals changed? Could you speak a little bit on that?
The first one is it's not educational. They're just wanting to create a story, and you cut so much more time and effort and money in the sales process. Is just, let's move, let's go. We have a sales conference, we need to release it. Brands have sales conferences, they have attractions, now museums, aquariums, zoos are getting into it. The number of ways which you can show an experience is interesting. So I don't know. I don't think a lot has changed more than now that people know about it, you can go a lot deeper, a lot faster. And that helps you move forward. Because you probably knew this, I mean, last year, I mean, you probably just went around and were showing your friends, you know, what a Gear VR was, and you spent 2 hours explaining that. And you can't actually get into how are we going to make great content. And now those conversations are happening, and it's refreshing. I think that's the first thing that comes to mind.
Sandra, I think you have a really amazing perspective and a really great overview on this industry, being able to be kind of on the ground floor, you know, one of the ground floors perhaps with Jaron Lanier and that crowd. And perhaps when you're talking about what's known as kind of the first wave of VR, perhaps in the 1990s, and now when we're now in the midst of the Renaissance or the second wave or whatever you want to call it, I would love to get your perspective on how it's changed, and maybe give us some insight as to why the first wave of the 90s perhaps didn't work, didn't take off, didn't stick, and then now why is it? Why is it not going to go away? Why is it here to stay?
Number one, in the first wave, I think there was a lot of romance versus business perspective. Much as I said, I fell in love and became obsessed with, I want to create these worlds for children from different cultures to learn best or better. But you have to have the business, and you have to have the money being invested. And in those days, there were, and there's always, I've seen it now because I've gone through any number of cycles with different emerging technologies. There's a ride up where the investors will come in and they will put down some early money, but then it crests and the trough goes down. With VR, we were in the dark ages quite a while. And then as the technology matures, perhaps it's in the research labs, perhaps it's in corporate development here, there. I think DARPA put a lot into VR at USC. It kept slowly building and improving, and now we're seeing the fruition of the technology being so much better. We do have investors who are very interested. The money coming from around the world, I collected some of the data, is astounding. They believe in it. So that looks like it's here to stay. Something else that has happened, and that is really, that I'm happy to see, is that more consumers have access to VR. When the New York Times gave, what, 100, how many million?
At this point, I think it's almost
Google
2 million.
Yeah.
They've given away quite a few.
And so I met the Google editor. He spoke in New York City, and he's one of the family who owns the New York Times, and they're committed to it. So that now we have, even though it will look crude in 5 years with what people like Casey and Eric are producing, we do have people able to have immersive experiences. So that's, you know, I think that's great. And there's also the support for it. And the AR, who would have foreseen Pokemon, for example, right? So we're seeing a lot of development go into the whole Pokemon concept, and I know that Samsung is going to do some things again that it's going to blow us away in not too distant future. So you've got the phone, you've got the head mounts. Every time I go to different places and I go into Sprint stores and I'll say, are you selling those gear headsets? Just kind of my own little ethnography research. And they tell me the funniest thing, that people don't realize they have to put their phone in it, which kind of boggles my mind. That's my market research for the moment, that somebody needs to communicate. You put the phone in. But it's there, the opportunity for more people than ever, and I think we're just going to see it become a part of everyday communication.
Awesome, thanks, Sandra. And Eric, we're going to end with you on this one. And we're talking about shopping experiences, right? E-commerce has been around for a while, and quite frankly, I'm still surprised that we even have brick and mortar stores anymore. They're still hanging around. But when we're talking about actually building a V-commerce as it's becoming known, how do you see that changing? I know you're a big data guy too. You know, I know you're really big into data. How perhaps does the data side of things feed into how you are creating these v-commerce experiences?
So I think what we think of, at least from the company and manufacturer side, what companies think of as their overall product life cycle will change. So as we look to having kind of virtual spaces where you go in and interact with products, I think a lot more of the interaction that people could have with those products but don't have today will start happening. So, we have this concept of kind of the product graph, where you would actually have everything about a product kind of all in one environment, and that would be, how you would pick it out, how you would configure it, how you would order it, but also how you complain about it, how you make requests for new features for it, and that all of that will kind of be available in almost in a community type format. So we see that as a way that products will differentiate by adding more opportunities for interaction with their customers, as yet not secured and secured. So it's just a rich format to engage with the people who use their products.
I want to ask you quickly before we wrap up this specific group, how do you see in-app purchases, the equivalent of in-app purchases, and then the equivalent of being able to purchase something directly on a web-based VR shopping experiences? Like, what kind of solutions are you building in, and where do you kind of see those direct monetization avenues? How do you see that evolving?
So I'm trying to make sure I understand the question.
How do people buy stuff in VR?
I mean, I think the pattern of one-stop payment solutions, or kind of like, the Apple Pay, and kind of it won't be that hard to wave your imaginary hand over an imaginary terminal reader. So I think that may end up just being a simulated thing. I know inside the Steam marketplace, the most inconvenient thing I have to do is take the helmet off to actually buy something.
Right.
Yeah. So, but that's a week's worth of product development. So, but I think that we'll end up having, there will be contexts in which people, whether it's at Amazon or kind of places that people already shop, where they'll have a payment, solution kind of set up. But yeah, I guess punching at the CBT is still a keyboard exercise.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Casey, thank you. Sandra, thank you. Eric, awesome. Give them a hand, guys.